On this episode of Just Informed Talk, the bombshell testimony that has been given by Tom Fitton on Capitol Hill. I have all the highlights, and here's a little taste of what is to come.
Are you saying that in your discovery process with FOIA that there is a potential conflict of interest between the charitable mission of the Clinton Foundation and what might have been going on? Have you found that?
Yes.
Hey guys, so before we get started with this video, I want to take a quick second to look at this article from thehackernews.com. And it talks about Google Plus having to shut down early because of another massive data breach, which exposed the information of 52.5 million users. Which begs the question, is your information private and safe on the internet? Well, for the most part, usually not. And most companies are using that information to track your every move and everything you do, say, buy, whatever. Well, there is a solution for this, and this problem is solved by something called a virtual private network. Now, this company, Virtual Shield, has an incredible product that I want to share with you today. I'm teaming up with them to bring you this great opportunity to get your own privacy back on the internet. And let me show you how this product works. So quite simply put, instead of telling you what a VPN is and telling you how it works, I'm going to show you. So look, this is my actual IP address. Now, a lot of this is blurred out for my own safety and security, but if you just go to Google and you put your public IP address, it'll pull it right up. Now, let me show you what happens when I turn on my virtual private network. Voila, there you go. See, now I have a totally new public IP address, which actually disallows the big tech companies from being able to track your every movement. So I'm actually asking everyone to go check out virtualshield.com because in my opinion, it's one of the easiest VPNs in the world to use. I just basically downloaded it and it runs in the background. You don't even have to do anything. It's one of the fastest VPNs. A lot of them have a huge lag, and that's really unfortunate because you have to go through a server that's somewhere else, and then that takes time. And they have this no log policy, which protects its users from any data breaches, meaning they don't keep any logs on where you go or what you do. So it's a great way to basically try to keep your privacy while you're on the internet. So if you guys want to go check it out, don't forget to check out their IdentiSafe add-on. It's got incredible features that help you protect your identity, and it'll actually allow you, the customer, the ability to block off computer, microphone, and camera access from any unwanted spies or hackers. Now that's a game changer for me because, I'm putting tape on all the cameras on my computer, but they can still hear you in the microphone. So to have that kind of protection is really, really important. So I'm encouraging you all to go check out Virtual Shield. You go to virtualshield.com/informed. Use the promo code INFORMED for 35% off, guys. That's a huge deal. You get 35% off. It's a great product, and I really hope you guys go check it out. So go check out virtualshield.com/informed. Use the promo code INFORMED to get your 35% discount, and you can even make it a Christmas gift or whatever. Just, make sure you remain private and stay safe while you're on the internet.
Clinton Foundation is registered as a 501c3 but continues to come under scrutiny for allegations of pay-to-play transactions and a failure to meet requirements to retain the tax-exempt status. Today's subcommittee will examine the reports and allegations against the Clinton Foundation in related to allegations of pay-to-play activities. This subcommittee will also hear testimony from whistleblowers alleging the abuse of the charitable organization status by the Clinton Foundation. And just recently, the Clinton Foundation was back in the news due to a sharp decrease in donations from fiscal year 2016 to fiscal year 2017. The donations to the foundation were $63 million in 2016 and only $26.6 million in 2017. Now, this represents a 58% decrease in the span of one fiscal year and corresponds with, obviously, Secretary Clinton's loss in the 2000 presidential election. Now, several reports suggest that the decrease in donations could reflect a pay-to-play activity in the years prior to the decline in donations. The numerous pay-to-play reports and allegations has led Congress to call for a special prosecutor to investigate the Clinton Foundation. In response, former Attorney General Sessions appointed U.S. Attorney John Huber to investigate the alleged wrongdoings by the Clinton Foundation. Mr. Huber was joined. The DOJ has been unwilling to make him available. Now, I find this not only frustrating for me, but frustrating for the American people. If indeed a special prosecutor was not appointed, and Mr. Huber was supposed to take that role, then why indeed have we not heard from him publicly in almost 9 months? And so, sadly, we will look at his loss of testimony today as perhaps an indictment on his inability to provide transparent oversight testimony before this committee. Now, the IRS was also scheduled to attend for this 501c3 registration oversight and the potential claims of the whistleblowers. And sadly, Mr. Horton was unable to attend due to a death in his family. This is certainly recognized as a legitimate excuse, and my thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family in this tough time. But we do have with us today Tom Vinton, President of Judicial Watch, who will be testifying here today about the body of work that he has conducted as it relates to the use of Clinton Foundation as a vehicle for pay-to-play transactions. And finally, Mr. Philip Hackney, an associate professor of law at the University of Pittsburgh. He rounds out our first panel and will discuss the allegations against the Trump Foundation that we have, where there has been the subject of media reports as well. The committee has also received over 1,300 pages of documents from the whistleblowers' claims that they've submitted to the IRS. These documents are part of a larger 48-page whistleblower claim submission with 95 formal exhibits, as much as approximately 6,000 pages of documents, and the claims allege abuse of charitable organization status by the Clinton Foundation. To further discuss their claims, we'll be joined by Mr. Lawrence Doyle and Mr. John Monahan on a separate panel following our current witnesses. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Meadows, and thank you, Mr. Connolly, for conducting this hearing. Judicial Watch is a conservative, nonpartisan educational foundation dedicated to promoting transparency, accountability, and integrity in government politics and the law. Without a doubt, we're the most active Freedom of Information Act requester and litigator in the nation today. And it's no secret that Judicial Watch has had concerns over the years about the Clintons' ethics and respect for the rule of law. So it was with some skepticism we greeted promises by Hillary Clinton in 2008 and 2009 to conduct herself accordingly or appropriately with respect to the foundation as a condition of her being approved as Secretary of State, with some skepticism. At the time, even CNN reported that Bill Clinton's complicated business interests could present future conflicts of interest that result in unneeded headaches for the incoming commander-in-chief. And to reassure President Obama and senators from both parties, Mrs. Clinton agreed to not participate personally and substantially in any particular matter involving specific parties in which the William Clinton Foundation is a party or represents a party. And additionally, the Clintons promised that the president's speeches and business activities would undergo a State Department ethics review, and that the Clinton Foundation would disclose its donors online and agree to significant restrictions on support from foreign governments, neither of which, to be fair, it wasn't required by law, but was contingent on her being confirmed by the Senate. We obviously had zero confidence that these promises would be kept, and began monitoring the ethics process and filed a Freedom of Information Act request in 2011 to see how that ethics process was being implemented. We were ignored for 2 years by the administration. We sued in 2013 and found something which wasn't terribly surprising to us, but still shocking, that former President Clinton gave 215 speeches and earned $48 million while his wife presided over U.S. foreign policy. Not one of those speeches was deemed a conflict of interest. That also included a consultancy with the controversial Clinton Foundation advisor Doug Band, who ran something called the Teneo Group. That consultancy ended after Teneo was caught up in a failed investment firm known as MF Global. State Department legal advisors approved Bill Clinton's speeches in China, in Russia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Panama, Turkey, Taiwan, India, the Cayman Islands, and other countries. The approvals were routinely copied to Cheryl Mills, Hillary Clinton's senior counsel and chief of staff, who had been a foundation official, had negotiated the ethics agreement, which raised, again, conflicts of interest issues as to why she was involved in this process at all. The documents also show that Mr. Clinton received a staggering sums from Saudi benefactors, specifically between $18 million and $50 million were raised from the Saudis during this time period. While Mrs. Clinton served as Secretary of State, Bill Clinton gave 2 speeches in Saudi Arabia, earning a total of $600,000. He spoke at the Global Business Forum in Riyadh, founded by the Saudi Investment Authority, and sponsored by the Bog Group, a commercial colossus with close ties to the Saudi family. He received $300,000 for that speech. There was one deal that was turned aside, but the exception in many ways proves the rule that this ethics process was no more than a rubber stamp to allow Bill Clinton to raise money from foreign corporations, mostly controlled or too often controlled by foreign governments. Specifically also, the documents show that he was approved to speak to something called Renaissance Capital, which is a Russian government-linked firm that it turns out later was connected to the Uranium One issue. Again, approved without comment by the so-called ethics process in the State Department. And then we found the Clinton email server. Judicial Watch litigation, to sum up, found the Clinton email server. Our Freedom of Information Act requests and lawsuits forced the State Department to admit they had all these emails they weren't telling anyone about. And also, another employee of the State Department who was participating in this server was Yuma Abedin, who, according to testimony she gave to Judicial Watch, needed it to conduct the Clinton's personal and family business. And to be sure, documents that we uncovered later as a result of uncovering the Clinton email server show the Clinton Foundation was in regular contact with Abedin and others in the State Department to get special favors and treatment for supporters and allies of the foundation. Specifically, for instance, Gilbert Shigori, who was asked to be put in touch with the State Department substance person on Lebanon. This was by Doug Ban, the Clinton Foundation official. Ban notes that Shigori is a key guy there, Lebanon, and to us, and insists that Abedin call Ambassador Jeffrey Feltman to connect him to Shigori. Shigori is a close friend of President Clinton, a top donor to the foundation. He appears near the top of the foundation's donors list, gave between $1 and $5 million to the foundation and pledged $1 billion to the Clinton Global Initiative. I don't know if he actually spent the money. He was convicted in 2000 in Switzerland on money laundering. So you can see that the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton State Department almost immediately broke promises to President Obama and the Senate to maintain a wall of separation between the foundation and the state. We have numerous instances, it's detailed in my written testimony, of pay-to-play and favoritism for Clinton Foundation supporters with the Clinton State Department. It's so bad that the Crown Prince of Bahrain couldn't get a meeting directly with Mrs. Clinton through the State Department, so he went through the Clinton Foundation to try to get the meeting. Many have noted that it was hard to tell where the Clinton State Department ended and where the Clinton Foundation began, and this was in response to these disclosures, again, not of insider documents, but government documents that have been hidden from the American people. Then there's the Uranium One controversy, and specifically, it was a controversial 2010 Uranium One deal. There were monies that were funneled into the Clinton Foundation by Uranium One interests, specifically Mr. Frank Giestra, and these monies were hidden from the American people. The foundation promised to disclose these monies in, as I said, this earlier agreement. $31.3 million was given to, for instance, the foundation beginning in January 2008, or around the year 2008. We have the new documents off of the document of the Renaissance Capital, $500,000, which is just the tip of the iceberg. And since then, both the New York Times has reported that Uranium One's chairman used his family's foundation to make 4 donations totaling $2.35 million to the Clinton operation. And of course, as I said, none of this was disclosed. And shortly after the Russians announced their intention to acquire the stake in Uranium One, Mr. Clinton received that $500,000 speaking fee from the Renaissance Capital organization. So we're asking for documents for Uranium One. We're getting the proverbial hand to the face from the administration on this. It's unfortunate that even the Trump administration doesn't want to divulge the full truth about this, but there is enough evidence to warrant serious investigations of the Clinton Foundation, and there is evidence that, in addition to this, that the Clinton Foundation investigations that may have been taking place during the Obama administration were suppressed by the Justice Department. So frankly, it's no surprise the Justice Department isn't here today. So I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Heiss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fenton, let me begin with you. I would assume that you're familiar with the Department of Justice Inspector General report that was released in February of 2018 pertaining to Andrew McCabe and the conversation he had
Yes.
pertaining to the
Yes.
Okay. There's some interesting information that is revealed in that report, specifically a telephone conversation that McCabe had with the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, possibly Matthew Axelrod, pertaining to the Clinton Foundation. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about in that conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Can you briefly describe what that conversation consisted of?
Well, according to the IG report, which I do quote in my testimony, they had this conversation regarding the Clinton Foundation investigation in August of 2016. McCabe said that the Justice Department expressed concerns about FBI agents taking overt steps in the Clinton Foundation investigation during the presidential campaign. According to McCabe, he pushed back asking, "Are you telling me that I need to shut down a validly predicated investigation?" McCabe told us, the IG, that the conversation was very dramatic. He had never had a similar confrontation before with DOJ. But prior to that, senior DOJ officials refused FBI requests to issue subpoenas on Clinton Foundation issues earlier in 2016, according to reports, and that, since then, supposedly there's been a new investigation launched, but I haven't seen any of the indicia of a serious investigation by the Justice Department yet.
Well, I would agree that that was a very dramatic conversation, and McCabe said, as you mentioned there, that he had never had a conversation like this in his career at the FBI. Do you believe that this demonstrates that the Justice Department was actively trying to protect the Clinton Foundation from an FBI investigation?
Yeah, it's just one of, I think, a few pieces of evidence demonstrating that the Clinton Foundation was being protected by the Justice Department, especially during that election year. These pay-to-play allegations, for instance, that we uncovered, these emails, they came out in August of 2016. Not that we timed them to come out in August 2016. That was a result of the Justice Department taking 8-9 months to release them to us, or the State Department taking 8-9 months to release them to us after they received them from Hillary Clinton and Ms. Abedin. So this was a very tricky time period, and so I can imagine there was pressure on the FBI and Justice Department to do something.
What, in your opinion, would be the reason that they were trying to protect the Clinton Foundation?
Well, the Justice Department at the time was working with the Clinton campaign to target President Trump. They were targeting President Trump. One of the key folks involved in that was Peter Strzok, who's had a demonstrated bias as an FBI official against Mr. Trump and for Mrs. Clinton. The irony of the McCabe situation is that McCabe is accused of leaking in pushback to the Justice Department, saying that we are investigating Hillary Clinton, which actually happened to be accurate, but was not something he was supposed to be telling the newspapers. That's why he allegedly lied about leaking to it.
Would you
so
say,
McCabe, there were some in the FBI who wanted to do this.
would you say it's somewhat, at least causes some red flags for the Justice Department? It sounds, what you're alleging is that they were actively involved in trying to influence the election.
Oh, it sure does. I think this is an area that needs to be explored. I wish it had been explored by this Congress. It wasn't sufficiently. I know there was pushback from the DOJ, and I know there's all sorts of concerns about foreign interference in our elections, but when you have bureaucracies like the DOJ putting their thumbs on the scales, it's something that both parties ought to be concerned about because, you know, one day the shoe will be on the other foot, politically speaking, and we just want to be able to restrain the agencies from being their own arm and branch of government.
So this may be another way of asking a similar question, at least a similar train of thought. Why would the Justice Department try to pressure the FBI to stop a perfectly valid investigation?
For political reasons. I mean, there were other investigations that were ongoing at the time before that concerned President or then candidate Trump and Hillary Clinton. So the complaint about overt steps targeting the foundation seemed to be, well, not credible. That's why Mr. McCabe reacted so strongly.
Well, I believe what you've just said is the whole reason we're here. And Mr. Hackney, although I appreciate your opinion expressing why and how we need to do our oversight, what has just been said is the precise reason why we are doing oversight.
All right. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
I thank the chairman. I just respond to my good friend from Virginia. We're not trying to distract anyone. We're just trying to stop this double standard that exists in our culture today. There's one set of rules for us regular folk, but it looks like to me a different set if you're part of the politically connected class. And that's all this is about. And we have two whistleblowers we haven't heard from. We're going to hear from them here in a second, and we'll find out what they have to say and hopefully get to the truth. So before I come to you, though, Mr. Fitton, I want to go to Mr. Hackney. Mr. Hackney, when did you work at the IRS again?
I was in the exempt organizations branch of tax-exempt government entities.
And what years?
2006 to April of 2011, I got an opportunity to join the faculty of Louisiana State University Law School, and it was an exciting opportunity.
Well, wonderful. We're happy for you. But you were there when the targeting of conservative groups started then, right?
Apparently it did, but I was not involved in any of that.
It says you were head of advised the commissioner regarding exempt organization requirements. This all took place in the exempt organization division of the IRS.
But I did not handle any.
Didn't know anything about it?
I did not handle.
Did you work
any
with
of
Lois Lerner?
I did work with Lois.
But you didn't know anything about the be on the lookout list or anything like that?
I was not aware of those particular.
When did you first find out that the IRS was targeting conservative people and this whole double standard that I just mentioned was going on right in the very division that you were supposed to be advising and overlooking?
Sure, I appreciate the question. I would disagree with characterization of targeting, but I was at the meeting.
Well, you don't think people were targeted?
I don't believe they were. I think there was
a list that had three terms: 9/12, Tea Party, and conservative. If those terms come up, you got put on the list.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate the question, and
You don't think there was targeting? The President of the United States
I believe
at the time
the IRS
said there
was doing its best to do its job and didn't have the resources and was trying to find ways of accomplishing.
This isn't about resources. This is about targeting specific points of view, Mr. Hackney.
I understand that.
The Attorney General and the President of the United States had a big press conference when it became public and said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. They talked about possible criminal liability, and you're saying it didn't even exist in the very division that you were head of?
I'm not saying it didn't exist. I'm not saying that they were not looking at Tea Party organizations, but I'm also saying that they were looking at many different other organizations, as you'll see from various reports that came out later.
That is not true. That is not what the Inspector General said. And frankly, if it was just, we were looking at everyone the same, I don't think Lois Lerner would have taken the fifth when she sat right where you were sitting here today. But I got to get to Mr. Fitton in my last 2 minutes and 30 seconds here. $2 billion since 2001, right, Mr. Fitton? That's what the Clinton Foundation took in. Is that right? $2 billion?
Numbers like that I've seen.
48 million in speeches, I think you said in your opening statements. That we did the math. You said like 200 something. That's like $250,000 for every single speech. He's pretty good. I mean, I've heard him speak, but that is amazing. And then you said in 2008, when Secretary Clinton became secretary, there was an agreement that I think in your testimony you said there were certain things she had to do. For the duration of her appointment, she would not be involved in all this money that the Clinton Foundation was taking in and all the speeches that her husband was doing, right? She wouldn't be signing off or making decisions about that. Is that right?
Yeah.
And the Clinton Foundation would disclose its donors. So there was an agreement that she worked out when she was Senate confirmed.
Right.
Okay. Did they follow the agreement?
No. And not in my view, at least.
So they had to get permission for her to be Secretary of State and continue to do all the things they did. They got permission, they got the okay, and then they didn't follow it.
No, the foundation immediately contacted Ms. Abedin, who worked closely with Mrs. Clinton, to start getting things done for foundation supporters, as I've described. And it's not what I described, the emails.
So the secretary, she kept her part of the deal, but she just had her lawyer, her chief of staff, sign off on everything. Is that sort of how it worked?
Yeah, Abedin did the heavy lifting there, yeah.
Yeah. You think there's a double standard right now in America, Mr. Fitton?
Oh, yeah, Mrs. Clinton's being protected and was protected, and frankly still is being protected from the consequences of her behavior at the State Department and subsequently.
My colleague from Virginia talked about some things that have happened recently with Mr. Cohen, but I think it's interesting. I don't remember anyone associated during the Clinton investigation. I don't remember anyone associated with the Clinton investigation. Well, first of all, they didn't even call it an investigation. Remember what they were told to call it?
Matter.
Yeah, we're supposed to call it a matter, right? It was obviously an investigation, but was told to be called a matter. I don't remember Cheryl Mills getting her door kicked in at 5 in the morning and having everything confiscated. I don't remember that at all. In fact, she worked out a deal ahead of time, got immunity before she even turned over any of her records or communications. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd like to, I would just love the committees or someone to investigate. We're doing it separately at Judicial Watch, but to find out whether or not, as report suggests, the foundation investigation the FBI was conducting in 2016 was actively suppressed by the Justice Department and curtailed. Public reports are that FBI agents were only able to read newspaper articles as part of their investigation. They were denied subpoenas and other basic tools available to them.
Yeah.
And when you compare and contrast the special counsel investigation into President Trump and his associates, that's what a real investigation looks like,
Yeah.
abuses aside. We haven't had anything comparable even during the Clinton email issue. And
Yeah.
certainly this is tied to the Clinton email issue.
Mr. Chairman, I know I'm a little over time. If I could real quick, I didn't expect to spend as much time on Mr. Hackney denying that there was targeting at the IRS. But you're I think exactly right. I've never seen this happen, Mr. Fitton, where the director of the FBI is fired, the deputy director is fired, the chief legal counsel is demoted, then leaves, FBI counsel Lisa Page is demoted, then leaves, and Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI, is demoted and then fired. I've never seen that happen. But what's interesting, those are the same people who ran the Clinton investigation and started and launched the Russian investigation. Never seen that happen in any other federal agency, even as bad as the IRS was. They only had a couple people, and none of them got fired. They just left. They're still getting a pension. So I've never seen anything like that. And the other thing that always strikes me as sort of interesting, and I'll close with this if I could, Mr. Chairman, is the names they gave the investigations, right? The Clinton investigation was the mid-year exam. But the investigation into possible coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia was Crossfire Hurricane. I'd like to, just the name suggests a completely different approach and a completely different standard in how they're going to run the investigation.
Thank you, Chairman Meadows. Thank you to our panelists for being here today. Quid pro quo. I had to look it up. It's Latin for something for something. A favor granted in return for something. In 2016, the Clinton Foundation received a $28 million donation from Morocco's King Mohammed. And shortly thereafter, Secretary of State Clinton relaxed U.S. foreign aid restrictions on Morocco. Mr. Fitton, was that a quid pro quo? Was that just a coincidence?
That's the matter that needs to be investigated. The foundation, the Clinton Foundation, and its associated, the Global Initiative, was able to raise tons of money during Mrs. Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. And some of that was purely charitable, there's no doubt. It was purely charitable activities the foundation engaged in, as Congressman Maloney highlighted. But when you have these foreign governments making massive donations to the foundation and major corporations making massive foundations to the foundation, many sometimes of which were out of line with other charitable activities, I think it's a fair question to ask what were they expecting in return, and was it a charitable enterprise, or were they just buying insurance? Now that may, or just making sure that they would get a better hearing over certain policies. But does it mean anything happened illegally? I don't know, but no one's asking the question.
Laureate University, $17.6 million to President Clinton, while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, to be the honorary chancellor. I did not know that paid so well. The founder at that university has another organization called International Youth Foundation that received $40 million in grants while Secretary Clinton was in office. After she left office, the grants went from $40 million to a little over $3 million. Is that a coincidence, you think, Mr. Finn?
I don't know. You have to ask the question. And this is why Mrs. Clinton promised these disclosures, and which makes it so problematic that these disclosures weren't followed as they were supposed to have been.
A Ukrainian.
We asked the State Department, give us the agreement. What did Mr. Clinton agree to do in exchange for that enormous amount of money? But that portion was blacked out by the State Department.
The Ukrainian oil and steel magnate, Mr. Pinchuk, donated between 10 to 25 million to the Clinton Foundation. In return, he was offered priority access to the State Department. Mr. Fenton, would you say it's quid pro quo?
It certainly seems that way.
And then lastly, and I know your organization has done some work on this, Mr. Fenton, the Uranium One deal. Those interests involved in that deal contributed more than $140 million to the Clinton Foundation. Mr. Fenton, could you fill this organization in on what happened in return for that $140 million in contributions?
Well, the State Department, in addition to other agencies, approved the goal of those entities, which was to get this stake in Uranium One. And again, the FBI was looking into it, and the allegation is the FBI investigation was curtailed and silenced, or at least aspects of it were silenced from public disclosure to protect the Clintons and the Obama administration generally from controversy on this. And again, another area for investigation.
In your opinion, how would that happen? How would it be silenced? How would it be curtailed? How could that happen?
You don't pursue certain leads. You undercharge in the case of the Uranium One. I think the allegations were that some folks were being charged and a lot of issues were being left out of the documents or the charging documents or the cases that would have embarrassed them. Whether all of that is true or not, I don't know, because the Justice Department isn't giving us the documents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have 33 seconds left. Let the record reflect. In Iowa, we have a saying: if it looks like a pig, if it sounds like a pig, and if it smells like a pig, it's probably a pig. And I think, based on what I read today, something smells here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good seeing you, Mr. Fenton. Now, is it true that the most recent filings for the Clinton Foundation have shown a significant drop-off in donations now that they have no political power?
I haven't seen the filings themselves, but there's been reports that there's been a 62% drop-off in donations.
So Sidney Blumenthal, a known political operative, was retained by the Clinton Foundation, correct?
Yes, I recall he was getting paid at $10,000 a month by the Clinton Foundation.
So now, while he was getting a rather large paycheck from the Clinton Foundation, he was also in Libya serving as then Secretary Clinton's unofficial advisor, correct?
According to the New York Times and documents, I think, disclosed as a result in part by Judicial Watch's efforts, he sent Mrs. Clinton 25 memos on Libya.
He was also pushing his own financial interest by trying to get contracts, correct?
Yes, he worked for the Clinton Foundation and he had business concerns in Libya. It's been reported.
Is there an ethical concern with a known political operative working for a supposed nonprofit that is pushing for a war that he can profit from?
Well, maybe. I think the public interest here is that Mrs. Clinton promised she'd stay out of Clinton Foundation business, and she immediately and secretly started taking advice from a Clinton Foundation official, Sidney Blumenthal.
Now, as we turn this body over to the opposition party here and they launch fake investigations into foreign influence, I would like to take some time to ask the panel about real foreign influence, because I know they're not going to. Now, we continually see foreign governments and foreign entities funnel millions of dollars to environmental groups. Two of the largest environmental groups in the world, the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Sierra Club, have received millions in grants from the Sea Change Foundation. The Sea Change Foundation itself got millions from a Bermuda company linked to Russia. As we all know, the environmental groups have undermined the energy sector in the United States. They've even got fracking banned in the cash-strapped state of New York. Now, if my friends across the aisle, the media and Mr. Mueller, were truly interested in Russian interference, would it make sense to start there, Mr. Fitton?
Oh, I've seen reports about that. The Russians obviously have an interest in making sure that competitors are harmed in the energy sector, and I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more attention, their involvement in the environmental movement here in the United States.
So Russian money affecting U.S. policies that Russia benefits, it's incredible. In my other committee, the Natural Resources Committee, we're trying to investigate the relationship between the Natural Resources Defense Council and their links to Communist China government. The NRDC has gotten cozy with the environmentally unfriendly Chinese government while suing the U.S. government whenever it can, particularly the U.S. Navy and its weapon development programs. Now, I'm sure I don't need to remind anyone here that China sees the U.S. Navy as its greatest foe. Mr. Fitton, should a nonprofit be made to register as a foreign agent if it is taking funds and orders from a foreign government that is trying to harm U.S. national and energy security?
Maybe. One of the things I noted about the Clinton Foundation activities is that Doug Bannon and others were always advocating on behalf of foreign nationals, which raised an issue with the Foreign Agents Registration Act as well. But certainly if my understanding of the law is that there would be registration requirements potentially if you're essentially taking orders from a foreign government and beholden to them financially.
Now, nonprofits like the Open Society Foundations have been giving billions from wealthy benefactors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now while there's nothing wrong with someone giving their money to an organization like Open Society, there is a problem when the federal government doles out millions of dollars in grants to these organizations. For instance, the National Immigration Law Center received hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants from the federal government and over $1 million from the Open Society Foundation while working against U.S. interest. Does it make sense to dole out taxpayer funds to groups that not only look to erode U.S. sovereignty, but are against official U.S. positions, Mr. Fitton?
Well, I think it's controversial. I think what also would be controversial is that the Soros operation and Mr. Soros' foundations, I think, is going to spend about $1 billion this year, as you point out, mostly of his own money, is subsidized in part by U.S. tax dollars. And he's a controversial figure in terms of his policy outlooks. And I question why it is tax dollars are supporting him.
It's definitely, one last comment, Mr. Chairman. You know, when we start looking at nonprofits, I actually was part of a nonprofit, and you're rated about how much of your dollar goes to the mission statement of what you detail. So, for example, a good nonprofit, 97 cents of every dollar goes to that mission statement. And listening to Mr. Hackney, I now notice that the Clinton Foundation was very top-heavy with a lot of employees, a lot of exorbitant travel, and not really a dollar-wise penny spent. Thank you, Chairman.
So let me go a little bit further, Mr. Fitton. I want to talk about, everybody's talking about how great the Clinton Foundation is and how above board and A ratings and platinum ratings and gold ratings and all of this. There is a report from November 10th of 2008, which is an internal audit. It actually comes from an internal audit that has a conclusion. It says, the challenges and deficiencies plaguing the foundation cannot be overstated. There are real and undermine the organization's effectiveness immediately and more long term. To address these issues that present immediate threats, the foundation should revamp its legal and HR operations, should review its governance structure and documents, and should have an open and honest discussion with the president about the future of the foundation. Would you not find that alarming if that was the conclusion of an internal audit, Mr. Fitton?
I wouldn't want to get an audit like that.
So,
The problem is there's another audit in 2000.
yeah, you got a microphone.
Oh, there was another audit in 2011 that raised some of the same issues.
Well, that's
Not as directly, but suggesting. That
well,
they had
that's where I was going, and I appreciate you mentioning that because that was in 2010, and then another audit in 2011, as you talk about, by a very different firm, talked about the potential conflicts of interest and the fact that those conflicts of interest policies that were suggested to be put in place. However, this is a quote. However, we did not find any evidence of the enforcement of the conflict of conflict of interest. Are you saying that in your discovery process with FOIA that there is a potential conflict of interest between the charitable mission of the Clinton Foundation and what might have been going on? Have you found that?
Yes. Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Clinton and the foundation recognized those potential conflicts of interest and tried to reassure the President Obama and the Senate that they would be taken care of and disclosed. And as I said, they were either rubber stamped or key aspects of it weren't disclosed. And or in the case of Mrs. Clinton, she directly started violating her own agreement by dealing with this Sidney Blumenthal and allowing her staff to, on a regular basis, take care of Clinton Foundation interests using public resources.
Mr. Fitton, is it likely, based on reports that you've seen, is it likely that the special counsel is also looking into things other than Russian collusion narratives for President Trump, based on reports that you've read? Are they looking into other matters as it relates to President Trump?
Oh, yes, I would assume the Southern District investigation, the campaign finance allegations that have been raised up there were as a result initially of interest from the special
Is it likely that they're looking into the Trump Foundation as well?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. What, based on your testimony, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, if the special counsel is looking at that, why would Attorney General Eric Holder not have looked into some of the issues as it related to the Uranium One deal? And why would they have looked the other way? Because apparently, according to your testimony, they did not know whether the FBI or DOJ ever alerted the committee members to criminal activity that they uncovered. And that was a quote from your written testimony. The investigation was ultimately supervised by U.S. Attorney Rod Rosenstein and Andy McCabe. Isn't it amazing how these names continue to show up? Isn't it amazing?